Okay, this is the 10th video. It might be the shortest one because I don't really have much time. I think I only have 25-30 minutes and I need to actually finish before that. Just a few little updates and the intro into the biblical counseling class. It is a major course, meaning that the degree that I'm going for, it is a part of that degree. The Old Testament survey, the classes that I've been taking, they're more of a general education classes for master's university before it gets into seminary. So this is the first major class, and we completed the first week. The reason for, and I think I explained that in the last video, I wanted to kind of change it up a little bit, and I was hoping that I would require less of a time commitment for the biblical counseling. I was hoping that I would just kind of watch videos, and maybe write a paper or two, and it turns out to be the exact opposite of what I was anticipating. All the lectures that I've been watching, if I could watch the lectures on the Old Testament survey in the car, at work, without really looking at a video, now I really have to pay attention. This is the first time when I am actually using my iPad with the study notes. Before, I just had the study notes on the side, and then I would just review the notes before the exam. With this class, you actually have to watch the video, and that's what the professor talks about in the beginning of every video. When you start the video, you have to have your notes, you have to have your Bible open, and you have to watch the class at the same time. So it's a lot more involved. The very first week, I think I spent about 4 or 5 hours on writing papers, and let's see if it actually shows grades here, because my last class was not showing this. And by the way, the final score for my Old Testament survey 2 was exactly 90%, so I was still in that A- category, which is a little bit worse than the first part of the Old Testament, but hey, I'm still above 90%. It is still an A. I'm pretty happy with that. I didn't really do as well as I wanted to on tests, especially the last one, but there was just so much information, and I think you do need to be a full-time student in order to retain all of that. So I'm still pretty happy with the class, pretty happy with my overall grade. And let's see here, grading, right? So grading, before it was showing me, and I don't know if you can see, let's see here, draw. No, I don't need to draw. I don't need the confetti. Actually, let's do confetti here. Oh, there you go. Before, on the Old Testament survey, the first part, I could see my grade in the right column. And in the last couple classes, I cannot see it in the web format. The only place where I can see that at is the Canvas app on the phone. So I had 3 assignments graded, and I'm at 93.33% right now based on 3 papers. Every week there is a discussion, and for this week we're talking about, on Thursday I have to do the write and not an article but a discussion point, and I also have to interact with other people, what other people wrote. So this week we're writing about dealing with stubborn desires through worship. I have to read the article and then talk about the 2 or 3 questions that the author of the article raises. And then the second question is, how do the concepts taught cause you to rejoice or be thankful for your salvation? Basically, you're reflecting on the article and reinforcing the thought. And then, what frustration does the article cause? Which I think is a poorly worded question. I think it should probably, instead of frustration, it should say, I don't know, what different opinions or what conflicting thoughts does this article raise or cause, or is this article fully completed in the sense of, does it answer the question of how to deal with stubborn desires through worship? Does it answer that question completely? So I don't really like how that question is structured, but that is the last question. And there are some people that really like to write. I mean, there is no way I'm writing this much. Once I write my response, I have to do it by Thursday night, and then I have to respond with two responses to other people's discussions. I don't really, that part of the class doesn't really excite me. The other thing that we have to do for the second module is finish the 5 chapters of the book, Instruments in the Redeemer's Hands. So I read that. It was 50 pages this week, and it's we're going to be done with this book for this class, and we're going to continue with that in the class of, let's see, what's the name of that class? Principles of Biblical Counseling. I think that's what it is. Let's go to our plan. Methods of Biblical Counseling. So we're going to finish that book during that class. And I think I also talked about the book that I purchased, When People Are Big and God is Small. This is the book. It's interesting because I have been talking to a pastor from Ukraine in the last week, and he was familiar with all those books that I mentioned. So I guess they read them in the seminary as well. He was very familiar with Edward Welch and Paul Tripp. Really good books. As far as the summary, I mean, it talks about the concentration on what matters the most. Sometimes what we try to do is we try to correct the actions, like this person is, he's got a problem with drinking or got a problem with drugs. A lot of times we try to correct the fruit, right, without really looking at the root cause. And the first module was concentrating and trying to drive the point that everything comes from the heart. Everything comes from the root. The fruits is what we see. But in order to change the fruit, we need to change the root. And it's the root of sinfulness into the root that we build everything on Jesus Christ. And that is the only way to change your behavior. A lot of time, and that's why they're talking about psychology, how psychology doesn't really work, because you're not changing the root in regular secular psychology. In biblical counseling, the first thing, you have to realize the fruits, and you need to know what needs to be changed. But in order to get rid or to change that behavior, to change the fruit, we need to put the new a new rastenia. Rastenia would be like, we need to plant a new tree, right, with a new root system. And that's what it talks about. It's been driving this point, how the heart, and the heart is not just a physical heart that pumps blood. The heart is your conscience, is your desires, is your needs and wants, and it's concentrating on how that needs to be changed first. And as the project, the first project that we're doing is a plan for a change. And what it really drives, what it really does, it gets you through a counseling session. So you have to be honest with yourself. You have to share with a professor about your struggle in life, and then it's gonna be talking about the plan. You're gonna create a plan of how to deal with it. You're gonna have to describe the problem, be specific, and that's another thing. In our culture, in the Slavic culture, we're really closed up. We can't talk about our issues because, well, what would other people think, and they could put a label on you. So as a society, as a culture, Slavic people are pretty closed up, and I think that's sometimes leads to more issues, because if a person has a drinking problem and he's closed up and he can hide it really well and he's afraid to admit to it, I mean, it's gonna grow into something a lot more problematic than just admitting to the issue. And I think another thing that we don't have in the Slavic culture is the people that you could trust and for counseling. There are people that we have pastors, right? We have deacons, but I think in the Slavic culture we don't put the required attention that you really have to be honest with people on the personal level, that they can trust you, and not just trust you that you're not going to be able to tell anybody, but trust in your ability to deal with that issue and point them in the right direction. And I'm not saying that there's no issue with that in the American culture, but I think it's a lot more prevalent in the Slavic in the Slavic background. So I'm going to have to identify my goals working with the problem, and then it talked about a lot of about the heart idolatry in the book. Have you asked the Lord for forgiveness? Right? Whenever you deal with issues, it's not that just you trying to clean up your act. It's asking for forgiveness from the Lord, and also the people that are affected by your actions. In what ways? And what it really does, I think, in this module, it's really going to open up, and you really have to be honest with yourself. And I think that's what's very important in the counseling sessions as well. You have to be able to be very transparent and honest. And in order to do that, you can't just be wishy-washy about things, right? You have to ask hard questions, and you should be expecting harsh realities. You should be expecting the worst case scenarios for the questions that you ask. And I think it kind of prepares us for it. What behavior or attitude needs to be put on? How will you do this and when? I think the purpose of this self-counseling project is to kind of go through what the people that you're going to be working with will go through, right? So to understand, and I think the biggest thing that I'm taking from this is, in order to counsel people, you have to be at a certain, not just, a lot of times we think about a certain status, right? You got to be a pastor, you got to be deacon, or you got to be somewhere in the higher ups. But I think what's the most important factor is your personal relationship with God. And it doesn't really matter if you don't have any status in the church, or if you are a deacon, or more especially if you're a deacon or a pastor. You have to be very approachable. You have to be trustworthy. People have to have some faith in you, that you actually have what it takes to do the counseling, to have those life experiences, and not just secular life experiences, but your relationship with God, your walk with God. And I think that's number one. Not the status, not the label of who you are, but the actual your actual heart. I forgot what I was going to say, but I think that the purpose of this class is going to be, to change my heart first, and to figure out what needs to be changed in order to have a change. Because a lot of times we try to change the behavior without changing the root cause. So, sorry for boring you with all this stuff. Maybe I'm repeating myself, but a plan for change, that's something I'm going to have to do. There's not a lot of reading for this week, or maybe because I already did it. But the reading report that I'm going to have to do, I think it's about 2,000 words based on the 5 chapters, and we're done with this book with Instruments in the Redeemer's Hands. And then I'm going to have to start reading When People Are Big and God is Small. I think about 50 pages a week on that. Then I'm going to have to do this self-counseling project, and it's a project that goes through the whole class, about 7 weeks. I'm going to have to write a paper on that. Memory verses. I'm going to have to learn 3 verses, and I think they are, they're stated here. 3 verses, and I've been using my app that I've that I've shared with you guys before, the Bible Memory Verse app. Matthew 18, 15, 17. I think I almost learned that one, and I just wanted to get the head start on this. If your brother sins against you, when I'm on the spot, I'm not going to be able to. Let's see here. Matthew 18, 15. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. And I think that's, we forget to do that often. A lot of times if we have an issue with somebody, and we usually talk behind their back, and myself included. I'm not excluding myself from that group of people, which is majority of the people. I would say probably 99%, 95% of all the people. That's what they do. It's really hard to come up to the person that did you wrong and then talk to them first, and just between you and them. And the verse says, and that's exactly what the verse says that you need to do. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault. You have to acknowledge that between you and him alone, just you two. And if he listens to you, you have gained your brother. And I think, from my experience, that's the best approach in resolution, conflict resolution. And unfortunately, that is the least used approach in real life. And that is the verse that is written in the Bible. So it gives us the guidance of how to deal with that. Galatians 6, 1, 3, and 1 Thessalonians, I still need to learn that, but I can probably, let's see here, I can probably read those. Galatians 6, brothers, if you caught anyone in transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in the spirit of gentleness. I think that's the biggest thing. We need to relate those people. We can't just throw Bible verses at them and say, well, the Bible says this, the Bible says that. You need to be relatable to the problems that they have. And it says here, with gentleness. That's another thing that I'm kind of noticing, not noticing, but I know about the Slavic culture, right? We're not very loving. We're not very gentle. We can easily, we're very, what's the word I'm looking for? We're very legalistic, right? Like, you got to do this, not that. If you're doing this, you're like, it's a very legalistic community. And I'm just being honest, right? I'm not trying to say that, the Slavic community is terrible, because every community has its own issues and strengths. I personally think that Slavic community has a lot of strengths, but unfortunately they're not in the spiritual sense. There are some issues, and because I am a part of a Slavic community, I want to acknowledge that, especially if I want to work in that community. And unfortunately, like I mentioned before, the gentleness factor in the Slavic community is lacked severely. And that's just a reminder for myself, not just to rebuke the leaders in the Slavic community, but to teach myself, because I was raised in that community, and in a sense, I kind of take on those traits as well. So what that verse speaks to me is that I have to be gentle in the counseling with people, and I have to kind of relate to their issues and be gentle with rebuke, which should be understood correctly. When I mention, gentle in rebuke, you still call sin a sin, but you have to have a conversation, have a relationship with the person. If you're trying to bring them back to God, you have to do, it tells you about restoring those people in the spirit of gentleness, which is very, very important. And then 1 Thessalonians 5:14, and we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them. With them all. I mean, we all have to be patient and admonish the idle. We can't just be sitting still. And that's a part of the God's change in my life in the last 2 years. I'd say I've been pretty idle. I wouldn't say idle. I was always kind of in the picture, but spiritually, I felt like I have been idle for a long time. And I don't think it's something of my own that, I started taking God seriously. I think it's God's work in me. And one thing that I wanted to share also, that I am a part of a biblical of a Bible study group on Viber, and it's amazing to me that you have to defend basic Christian doctrines in Christian circles. I think the last time that my memory brought me to the very first issue that I had to defend, that the people are born sinners. There's some people think that when you are born, you're not really sinful. You get that sinful nature at some point of your life. I'm not really sure when. I guess some people might become sinners within a day or two after they're born, and some of them might not become sinners until 6 or 7 years old. I don't know. I don't know what the stance is. I always understood the stance of the Bible as, people through Adam are sinful, just like the sin entered through Adam. It all passed down on us. Psalm, I think it's 51, when David talks about his birth, that he was born in sin. That's one of the verses that talks about the sinful nature. And this particular Bible study on Viber kind of focuses my attention on the things, and it's in Russian as well. It helps me to understand the questions that the Slavic community has, and the questions that I might have in the future. So I'm really glad that I am a part of that biblical, not biblical, it is biblical, of that Bible study group, because it prepares me for some of the questions that I'm pretty sure I will need to face in the future. And I'd rather face them in this friendly atmosphere when people are prone to listen to your worldview or Bible view, biblical view, even if it differs from their view. Sometimes when you talk to people, they are so stubborn on what they've been taught that they take that theology that was passed down to them by somebody else as the true theology, and you can't even reason with them. You can't even look at certain things differently. They treat it as they have the ultimate truth. Everything else is a heresy, and it's really tough to talk to those people. And you really have to have your act together and your knowledge, right? Because when you respond to those people, you really have to respond biblically, not. And I think that's where most arguments fall apart. When people talk about, well, I think it's we were talking about the sacrifices, and the question was posed like, well, how? I guess this person was saying, well, the sacrifices were really important because the blood of the sacrifices was actually cleansing you as well. And the question that was posed was, well, did Jesus sacrifice as well? Which his proposal was, yeah, he thinks based on the Bible. I'm not really sure which verses he was talking about, but he was saying how it is safe to assume that Jesus was doing the sacrifices. To which I responded in a way that we don't really know if that had happened or not. And my main thing was, I mentioned that in the Bible, when you read the Old Testament, right, whenever a main character was sacrificing something, it was mentioned in the Bible, right? When we had the Israelites in the wilderness, when we had David doing sacrifices, when we had those bigger characters sacrificing to God, it usually talks about it in the Bible. And I would assume that if Jesus did it regularly, at least somebody would mention something about it. and I personally don't think that it's mentioned in the New Testament. I could be wrong. As far as I don't have a strong stance on that. But I also mentioned that, Jesus was sinless. What would the sacrifice be for? Because the sacrifices were normally made for sin, and then I did acknowledge that some sacrifices were as a Thanksgiving offering. And I don't know, maybe Jesus did do that, maybe not. So a lot of times we start with one topic and it just develops or it just grows into a lot of different questions, and I still like that because it concentrates your attention on the Bible. So whenever you hear or listen to people's responses, you always have to have this attitude of biblical concept. Okay, if it's a biblical concept, right? Where are we looking for the answers? Are we just basing our answers on our personal experiences and assumptions, or are we basing it in the Bible? And sometimes, when a question gets proposed, and it says, well, it's actually this way, you really have to know the Bible in order to answer that. And I think that's why biblical counseling. It's very important for biblical counseling to have a really strong foundation in the Bible, because you can't give something. You can't give something to some. What's that saying? You can't give what you don't have, right? So if you don't have that foundation, you will not be able to respond to those questions properly. And like I mentioned in the beginning, we don't want to change the behavior. We want to change the foundation, the root system. And in order for you to be able to be God's instrument, to be an instrument in God's hands, you're not doing it personally. You're not changing somebody's life personally. You're just being an instrument, God's instrument in His hands to change the person. You have to know the Bible, and not just in the way that, well, I think it's this way or that way, or we've been taught this way. You really have to know the Bible. You really have to know the New Testament and the Old Testament, and know how to put those together. And one of the biggest things that I was like a revelation to me is, you can't just take out the New Testament and study the New Testament and go with that. You have to understand the Old Testament and how all of that connects together. So as always, my wish is that you guys keep praying for me, and whenever, I'm not really sure when you're going to be watching this video. It could be several years after it's been recorded, but I would still like to ask for prayers for the personal growth, that I could be the instrument in God's hands, that I would never get to the level of where I would think that I personally, with my charisma or with my knowledge, can change somebody, but that I could only be a humble instrument in God's hands to change people's lives dramatically. That's pretty much it. I think I'll record another video after I do finish this week with the personal, whatever it's called, the personal project. Let's see here. The self-counseling project, the plan for a change. So we'll go with that. We're 29 minutes in, one of the shorter videos. Thank you very much for watching. Please pray about me, and I hope that God works in your life as well, in your lives as well. Thank you.